everyone, and welcome back to the Conscious Style podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Nina Gbor. As the founder of Eco Styles, Nina Gbor is an award-winning sustainability advocate, ethical fashion speaker, writer, educator, and climate activist. Her work is derived from research and lived experiences in the global South and global North, with focus on equity, social justice, and development. Nina has a master's in international development and is a former sustainable fashion tutor in short courses at RMIT University in Melbourne. She coined the phrase "get off the fashion trend mill," something we'll be talking a lot about today, to address fashion over consumption. This is the notion that individuality and self knowledge should be the premise for consuming clothing, not fashion trends. Nina, I'm so excited to have you on this show today. I love everything that you're doing.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it for a few weeks now.
Yay. Me too.
Yeah, the opportunity to talk about, I think, what I can safe to say mutually our favorite topic. Um,
Yes,
yeah, no
absolutely.
better way to
Absolutely.
spend the morning.
Yeah, we have very different time zones here. I'm wrapping up in the evening here, and you're in the morning in Australia.
Yeah.
So, the first question I would love to ask you, since this podcast is called the Conscious Style
Mhm.
Podcast, I was wondering, what does conscious style mean to you?
So conscious style to me is kind of about choices that are made with the awareness of the effects or the impacts that those choices have on our social and physical environment, and also other people, so both the
Hmm.
sort of short-term and long-term effects and domino effects, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have so many questions for you when it comes to sustainability and fashion and
Mhm.
personal style and all of that. But first, I'd love to know, how did you get started on your own conscious fashion, sustainable fashion journey?
Um, I feel like I've been on it since I was kind of born through happenstance. It's kind of a long story. So yeah, you're sitting down, so we're good. Um, so when I was a little girl, so I'm originally Nigerian, which is in West Africa, but I grew up in the US in Indiana. So when I was a little girl, like from the age of sort of 3 onwards, my mom and my brothers and I, we used to watch classic movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So, movies with, Audrey Hepburn and Grace Kelly and a lot of these sort of silver screen icons. And I fell in love with the style in those movies, right? As a little girl, I kind of thought that that's you grow up when you grow up to become a woman, that's how you dress, like that's how you're supposed to look like, right? So of course later on found out that no, that's not true. But that's where my love for style actually came from style icons like Audrey. And when I was a teenager, we moved back to Nigeria, and this was where a lot of secondhand clothes. I think we now know that a lot of secondhand clothes from countries in the global north, when gets sent to countries in the global south, Nigeria being one of them. So I remember seeing a vintage dress at a secondhand store. These clothes that had been imported, and it was kind of like seeing a celebrity for the first time, because it was like the kind of dress that I would see in the movies growing up, and I was freaking out like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. And I went into the store to try it on, but I ended up trying on like a lot of the modern, sort of more contemporary stuff and vintage stuff. So I ended up mixing vintage with sort of contemporary stuff. And I guess I was about 15 at the time. And I guess that's the day my career was born, even though I didn't realize it at the time. But what was beautiful was it gave me, being able to play dress up gave me a sense of freedom. And I didn't have to feel like I wanted to follow the trends that all the girls in school were following. And I loved it. But something I ended up observing a couple of things at the time, two separate events. So one was that at the time, a lot of people used to make their own clothes. So like every other store at the market was a tailor's like tailor shop, and a lot of them were closing down, so people weren't
Mm.
making clothes as much as they used to. And then secondly, at that time, they didn't really do landfills in Nigeria, so people would dump their stuff like in nearby fields, fields that were
Oh,
close to
wow.
residential areas. Yeah, so it would literally accumulate as mountains of trash. And I remember, and it reeked so bad. And I remember, like, whenever it would rain, the water would wash through these mountains of trash and into like local lakes and rivers that people used for domestic things.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, I remember thinking that is, first of all, I thought it was really gross, but secondly, it was like, that's got to be toxic, you know? And they used to
Mhm.
do stuff like sometimes burn the trash mountains, at least the top of it, just so to reduce it down. So imagine all this stuff is being mixed in. So I remember thinking to myself, this is a major problem. And it made me really uncomfortable, but there was no one I could talk to about it at the time, you know? So um, eventually, I ended up moving to the UK to study and work and live, and which was phenomenal for shopping because I don't know if you know, but the UK is amazing for vintage shopping. So I continued on that trajectory, and at the time, I was talking more about people wearing secondhand as opposed to buying new because there was so much stuff. I had no idea statistically how bad it was, but I just knew that why
Mhm.
would do people keep buying new stuff when there's so much amazing secondhand stuff, and in 2015, I moved to Australia, and it was interesting because 2 months after I moved, the True Cost documentary came out, and it literally felt like a sign from the universe, because I knew that fashion was damaging to the environment, at the end of life of clothing, when it gets shipped to countries in the global south, but I had no idea how bad it was during manufacture, you know? And I was like, oh, it was mind blowing for me, as it was for a lot of people who saw the documentary for the first time, and that was when my focus kind of shifted a little bit from to include the environment and social justice aspect of fashion, as opposed to just mostly being sustainable with secondhand. And it all just kind of boded well because my master's degree that I did in the UK was international development, so it all just kind of fit together. I felt like, I don't know, I couldn't have designed like my life better than I guess the universe did. So it kind of felt like I was meant to be in this career. Plus the fact that I love clothes, um, just sort of made sense. And so yeah, I'm very 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 grateful to kind of be here and be on this journey and work and do what I love and be able to advocate for better systems around clothing and consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. What an incredible journey, and so interesting how you kind of came at it first from the waste perspective and saw the realities of fashion's waste. I feel like that's quite a reverse of what I would say most people in the global north experience. At least I know for my sustainable fashion journey, I first saw the true cost and the horrible ways that our
Mm,
clothes are being produced,
yeah,
and then it wasn't until like years later that I learned about fashion's waste crisis. And maybe
yeah,
that's changing because I feel like there's a broader awareness in
hmm,
general of fashion's waste problem.
yeah.
But I guess my follow up question for you is like, what inspired you to create this get off the fashion treadmill like philosophy or motto or practice? Like, when did that come about, and like what is it exactly?
Yeah. Okay, so it first came about because as I mentioned earlier, I'd look at people and wonder why, before sustainable fashion was actually a movement. Um, since I was little, I'd look at people and wonder why they were buying so many new clothes when there was just all this secondhand fabulousness, all around us, right? And so I started off advocating for that. But it was just the idea that people were stuck in this mindset of the latest fashion trends. You know, I have to wear what, and it just felt, even when I was really young, it just felt like, why would you let someone dictate to you what you should wear? Because I found so much freedom expression in trying new and different things, right? So I think it was just a hatred for the notion, whenever you picked up a magazine or whenever you go to a blog site or even when you're watching television, or even the news, they'd have a stylist that would come on and be like, oh, this season's trends are, and we're all meant to mindlessly follow what the stylist or what the fashion brands or the fashion industry says we should be wearing that season, like automatons. It just felt so wrong to me. So I get and as we know, like fast fashion is a term used to describe clothes that are designed, manufactured, and sold quickly in order to stay up to date with the latest trends, right? So trends kind of give fast fashion and ultra fast fashion a vehicle to thrive and to waste and to overproduce,
Mm-hmm.
and they do that in the process of you know making millionaire millions and billion-dollar profits whilst exploiting workers and wreaking havoc, to damage the environment. So the fashion treadmill is this constant cycle of continuously buying, then disposing shortly after. That's really what the
Mm-hmm.
treadmill is. Because
Mm-hmm.
our whole lives, fashion has made us believe that we're not enough as a person if you're not wearing the latest trends. And trends used to be 4 seasons, and as you know, now we have, like, I don't know, is it 110, 120 seasons, even more. And so, because it's all because fast fashion has manipulated this notion of trends, right, and taken it to now supersonic levels, which is why, again, overconsumption is so rife, and why fashion is one of the most polluting industries in the world, and a contributor to climate change as well. So when I say that, some people say stuff to me like, well, I don't follow fashion trends, so it doesn't apply to me. And I'm like, well, if you're constantly shopping retail, whether it's online or in person, even if technically you don't know what the latest trends are, I'm like, girl, you are still on that treadmill, and you need to get off of it. Yeah, because over consuming fashion is being on the treadmill, and I feel like the whole concept of trend followership is the vehicle that's allowed fast fashion, ultra fast fashion to thrive so spectacularly, as I mentioned. But really, I think the meaning of treadmill has actually expanded and evolved to mean to include the modern culture of overconsumption that we have. So it's not just fashion, but you see the same overconsumption patterns in, they're prevalent in food and electronics and automobiles, and so on. So that treadmill concept is about our modern lifestyle of overconsuming. We need to get off that treadmill. And yeah, I think fashion and textiles is a good place to start because everyone wears clothes. So it's a sort of an easy conversation. Well, not everyone, but I think it's safe to say probably a huge portion of the planet wears clothes. So it's a good place to start those conversations about overconsumption.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like fashion is the area that we see this trend cycle most obviously.
Yeah,
Of course, we see it with home decor and furniture as well, and there's
yeah,
home trends, but they tend to not cycle as quickly, although I'm seeing it speed up, but it tends to not be quite so fast since
hmm,
home goods are generally more expensive. But
yeah,
I mean, Sandra Neeson, in a previous episode, episode 66,
hmm,
had a great quote, and it was something along the lines of fashion is planned obsolescence. Like,
yes,
that is the
precisely.
definition of fashion, because fashion is like what's in, what's out. It's
Hmm,
designed to be short term. It's
exactly.
designed to go out. It's part of the nature of the trend cycle. There it
Yeah,
goes in and then eventually falls out. And so
yeah,
it's fashion is obsolescence
yeah,
by design,
yeah,
which I
totally.
think is really useful to think about it in that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, that's the, like you said, that's the business model. Um, and I think it's such a sucky business model. I can't believe it's lauded by huge financial platforms. It's shocking, the world we live in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who want to start getting off of the treadmill, you
Hmm.
talk about how self knowledge is really important to
Yeah.
stopping overconsumption. So,
Yeah.
how can we begin this process of self knowledge when it comes to our style and fashion choices? I know you have like a personal style formula, so
Oh,
maybe you
yeah.
can share that with us.
Yeah, yeah, because self knowledge actually feeds very much into the personal style formula, which I'll explain what that means in a second. So, know thyself is literally the number one rule for so many things in life, including, the personal style formula, right? So, the starting point of knowing yourself is figuring out, kind of who you are, what you're about, what your values are, what's important to you, what you stand for, what makes you happy, what your purpose and mission is in life, and, looking at, what your goals are, whether they're short-term goals or long-term goals, and letting your style be determined by these questions, right? Let your style speak to these questions. Um, like so the personal style formula kind of helps you curate, your dream wardrobe in a way that's sustainable and always makes you look and feel amazing because it's crafted just for you, right? The idea is to have a wardrobe style that you can keep for a long period of time as opposed to following trends. Now, I mean, like, if you step out wearing, for example, a green dress, right, and it just works perfectly, suits your complexion, matches your eyes, and you walk out of your house, and everyone from the postman to the store clerk to, I don't know, your colleagues at work are like, "Oh my gosh, you look stunning, you look amazing, that color is perfect on you." You're not likely to get rid of that dress because it makes you feel good and it looks amazing, right? And possibly brings joy to other people when they see you in it, right? So
Hmm.
that's yeah. So that's what the personal style formula is sort of based on. Clothes that sort of make your skin glow, make you feel vibrant, and that's pretty much what it is. And on top of that, if you get pieces that complement or match those garments in your wardrobe, so that you can wear them in multiple ways, you can restyle them in multiple ways for multiple occasions, then it makes your wardrobe complete, right? So the way you craft a personal style formula is, like I said, know yourself is the first rule. Um, your color palette, right? You can find out what colors work for you by going on Google, right? There are different stylists or different platforms show you how to find your color palette, or you can hire a stylist to help you do that. Secondly, your body shape. Now, this is slightly controversial because some people like the androgynous style and don't follow the traditional sort of old school rules about dressing for your body shape, which is absolutely fine. But what I say to people is, when you know yourself, you kind of just work out what works best for your body shape. Are you more, you like clothes that are, like I said, androgynous, then, tailor your style to that, right? If you like clothes that are feminine and you want to go traditional, tailor your style to that. Whatever it is for you, just figure it out and then add your color palette to it. Now, third is where knowing yourself comes through strongest, which is your lifestyle, personality, and intuition. So, you know, whatever your lifestyle is, if you're someone who has a 9 to 5 job and then you go to the gym after work, or you go for drinks with friends on a regular basis, you want a wardrobe that can accommodate all of those things, right? If you're a mom with 3 kids, which means you might have a job as well, and then you're taking kids to soccer practice, you're going to PTA meetings, you're doing family stuff, but you want to be stylish, and you also have a style that speaks to that. But intuition, I always say, like, we sort of inherently know what we want style wise and don't need people to tell us. I'll give you an example. I've known people who are like tattoo artists that whenever they're bringing a certain color to someone to tattoo them, the person will just, like, they'll have this like innate sort of flinching if it's not a color that they if it's a color that they're opposed to, right? So I feel like we kind of innately know what works for us. We just kind of need to tune in a little bit and listen to that inner knowledge, right? Of what our, so I say, our body wants or whatever, right? So when you combine those 3 elements of color palette, body shape, and self knowledge, you get your personal style formula. right? And you're likely to have the clothes that's when you'll have the clothes that you're going to keep for a long time, um, and restyle in different ways because they just work perfectly for you. You know, it's not a wardrobe that's trying to be like Jennifer Lopez or trying to be like Billie Eilish or whatever, whoever or whatever influencer you follow. It's one that's made just for you, right? And that's when you get people. It's not about what people say, but sometimes one of the things you hear when you do that is, "Oh my gosh, I just love your style. You always look amazing," you know, and it becomes effortless after a while, right? So yeah, that's pretty much
Mhm.
what a personal style formula is.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I really love that emphasis on instinct because I think that many of us can relate to that, like trying
Yeah,
something on, whether it's
yeah,
something that we bought or something we're trying on in the fitting room, and
yeah,
it's just like, it doesn't work. Or
yeah.
it feels amazing and you're like, this feels so me. And
Mm-hmm.
often the pieces that are hanging in my closet that I don't wear are the pieces that I'm like, not sure
Yeah,
about this, ugh, but I
yeah,
really need something for XYZ,
yeah,
or but it's on sale, or
yeah,
but
exactly.
and I like sort of ignored that instinct, which
Hmm.
definitely I regretted later. So
Yeah, yeah,
good
yeah,
advice.
yeah, definitely. That happens to us a lot. I can tell you, like, I've gone into like well, thrift stores. We call them op shops here in Australia. I've gone
Mhm,
in, with friends, and I'll try something on, and everybody's like, "Oh, that looks great on you. You should buy it. You should buy it." And inside me, I'm like, "This is not me," but everyone's
mhm.
like, "It looks so great on you. You should buy it." And I end up taking it because of that sort of pressure, although it's a good kind of pressure, but still, like, and then I don't, I end up not wearing it. It literally sits in my closet for a few months before I take it to a clothes swap or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
happens.
No, for that reason, I kind of don't love shopping with people. I kind of
Yeah.
like shopping alone
Yeah.
because I do feel like I tend to be a people pleaser by nature.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so if I love a piece, but my friend's like, I don't know, it's like not worth the price or I don't
Yeah.
love it. And then
Yeah.
I maybe don't get it, but I really loved it. Or the reverse happens where
Yeah.
I'm like, not sure about it, but like, oh no, that looks amazing on you. That looks amazing on you.
Yeah.
And then I'm uncomfortable in it all day when I
Yes.
wear it, and I'm like, "Oh,
Exactly.
no. What's
Exactly.
a bad idea?"
I think you just unearthed a really good tip. Go shopping by yourself. I never thought of that, but you are so right. I'm going to add that to my list of advice. Courtesy you.
And it
Oh,
might depend on the person, but yeah,
yeah.
that's just, like, for me at least, and I do still I like to take my friends into thrift stores because a lot
Mhm.
of them aren't accustomed to shopping secondhand, so I like to, like,
Yeah.
introduce that to them or
Yeah, absolutely.
but, yeah, I do think that most of the time, if I'm actually wanting to buy something, I do like going alone.
Yeah, yeah. I totally love shopping alone. Well, because I mean, for me, it's like my sacred hour. It's like my religion. Like, nobody talk to me. Okay, this is a sacred hour. I need to focus. That's literally what
Yeah,
it is like for me. Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure, for sure. And shifting gears slightly, I
Mhm.
also saw on your website that you have a page that talks about style well-being.
Mhm.
And I love this because, as you were referencing before, the fashion industry and trends thrive on making us feel like we're not cool enough, pretty
Mhm.
enough, trendy enough, young
Yeah,
enough, all that. And
absolutely.
we
Yeah.
kind of buy into trends in order
Mhm.
to fit in.
Yeah.
And so fashion often leaves us feeling very empty or maybe anxious, perhaps with a negative body image.
Mhm.
So, how do you sort of flip that on its head and instead cultivate a healthier relationship to style and even help your clients use style as a source for well being to an
Mhm.
extent?
Mhm. Um yeah, in terms of like, yeah, helping them let go of the frustration and anxiety that exists often prevalent within fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, style well-being is basically, it's just your personal style without all the stress of needing to conform to whatever, the trend expectation is for someone of your age group or background, or whatever peer group that you're in, particularly, or even media expectations, right, of you being whatever demographic you're in, right. um so it's just freedom from all of that, really. Um because you can use your personal style formula to have sustainable style that totally aligns to you in every single way. Um, and kind of as a self-empowerment tool so that no one will have the power to make you feel less than, you know, just because you're not contributing to making fashion brands even wealthier than they already are, you know. So it's almost like fashion brands have done such a good job in breaking down our self-image and our psyche that we have a lot of people even policing capitalism, in the sense that if you're not wearing, you know, like when I was in high school, for example, this happened a lot. If you're not wearing whatever trend is, you had people that kind of not make fun of you, but you're not part of the cool kids, you know. And it's amazing, phenomenal, even how fashion brands have managed to do that over the years. You know, get people to do free labor of policing other people to wear trends.
Hmm.
So it's a very interesting how we protect extreme capitalism in that regard. Um, but I think the important thing is to let go of everything that fashion has taught us our whole lives. And it's really hard because even since the 1940s, I've seen trend, you know, commercials about trends, be it very, very different the way it was styled. But, you know, this concept has been around since before we're even born, right? So it's like we have to kind of unlearn a lot of what fashion has taught us and kind of start from scratch in terms of our relationship with clothing and build that confidence. And I know it's really hard when everyone in your probably your physical environment or your community is doing the same thing. If they're all buying fast fashion, ultra fast fashion, and it feels like you're swimming against the tide if you want to do something entirely different. Believe me, I know what that pressure is like. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but
Hmm.
there are ways for you to find your community. If even if everyone in your physical environment is doing one thing, you know, you can go find an online community. You know, there are always people who feel the same way that you do about an issue. It's just finding them, right? So find your community online or even in person and draw strength from that community, you know, um, in towards the direction that you want to go in. You know, that's usually what I tell people. Um, and yeah, just do that. Find your community and follow that, and just completely let go of everything that you've been told is right to do in fashion, particularly when it leads to waste and when it leads to you doing things that you don't feel comfortable in and dressing in ways that you feel don't really align with who you are. And I think that's how, you know, when you begin
Hmm.
that journey, you'll get to a place where you're completely unfazed, you know, by any trends or anything else, you know. And that's when you have like a well-being around your style because it aligns with who you are as an individual and what you're wearing. So basically who you are on the inside is being expressed externally, and that's such a great
Hmm.
feeling, you know, such a beautiful feeling of alignment, you know, to be in that place.
Yeah, I love that alignment. That's something that a previous guest, Carrie Weil, talked about. Like
Hmm.
the clothes that you're or everything that you're wearing on the outside,
Yeah.
how amazing it is when that's aligned with sort of who you are on the inside. And
Yeah.
it's sort of hard to comprehend. You're like, it's fabric and it's a shirt, you know, but
Yeah.
I feel like when it happens, you feel it. You're like, yes,
Yeah.
this is
Who I
me.
am. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that is style well-being. You know, you want to have that. You know, we talk about mind, body, health, you know, well-being, but you know, style well-being is important. You know, self-image is we underestimate the power of self-image, particularly in the Western culture. And, you know, when you have that, it's just magical. You know, you show up differently in everything, in all
Hmm.
areas of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have been really lazy about getting dressed lately and doing this podcast and it's on video, so I'm like
Uh-huh.
I have to like get ready
Yeah.
and I just feel so different. I'm like
Yeah.
I need to record more videos so that I push myself to like
Hmm.
get dressed cuz I work from home and so
Yeah.
it's very easy
Yeah.
just to wear sweatpants, not change out of
Oh
my
my gosh,
pajamas till 3
yes.
o'clock.
And you guys are in winter, aren't you, right now?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
so cold,
It's cold,
so
yeah.
it's
And plus,
also
I feel like
like I don't want to get out of my cozy.
I know that feeling. And I feel like the pandemic has changed a lot of us. So even like since the pandemic, it's been hard to get out of the habit of just wearing the same thing every day and being in your sweatpants. It's hard for everyone, you know, but
Mhm.
yeah, but when you manage to do it, it's so rewarding. It can be so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have to get over that like initial obstacle because although it's cold now, I also felt similar in summer. I'm like, it's so hot. There's nothing I want to wear
Yeah,
except like
exactly.
sweat short, like, like track
Yes.
shorts
Track
and a
shorts,
tank
totally. And a
top.
tank top. That is me right now. You should have seen me struggling to get dressed for this meeting. I was like, what am I gonna wear? Oh my gosh. I can't wait because I was wearing this really, really, really old t-shirt that has a stain, I think a food stain on it. And I was just like, no, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Yeah.
Good thing is it's just top, bottom or not bottom, top up. So I'm wearing leggings on the bottom, but like a nice blazer on top. So
Yeah,
can
yeah,
kind of mix the
exactly.
comfort and style.
Exactly. That's how
But
you do it. Yeah.
yes. But I wanted to ask you when it comes to trends and personal style,
Hmm.
do you think there is a way to engage with trends in a mindful way that is can still be aligned with our personal style and why or why not?
I mean, the simple answer is only if you know yourself, you know, your personal style. Um, and then a trend comes along that fits that style. But really, no, there are other ways. For example, if you rent or hire your wardrobe, you know, because there are some people that they're just in a phase where they just didn't, or it might not be a phase, just who they are. They just enjoy that change, you know, and that's
Mhm.
fine. There's no judgment to that. So they, you know, in that situation, you can always rent or hire your wardrobe. You know, there's so many platforms that have like even like have like a wardrobe subscription service. So you get, I don't know how long it is, but I think for like it could be a season or it could be 6 weeks or a month, whatever. You get like a package of clothing that you can wear for that period, and then a month later or after that period of time is done, you can exchange it for another set of clothes, which is a fantastic idea because you're not buying, you know, you're not contributing to this waste, you're just reusing, you know, and you're getting that experience of something new and different, you know, getting to it's like you're getting to explore another side of yourself through an entirely different wardrobe, right? With less waste. Of course, there are some environmental consequences, you know, but still, it's not as much as, you know, buying brand new, right? So yeah, yeah, I think it's okay to do it in that regard.
Hmm. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast earlier today with James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, and
Hmm.
he's seen as like a habit expert, and
Hmm.
he was talking about breaking a bad habit, which I was thinking of with my work. Maybe
Yeah,
leaving behind fast fashion or the fast fashion mindset at least, and over,
yeah.
not over consuming.
Hmm.
And he was saying that sometimes the easiest way to stop a bad habit is to find a replacement.
Yeah.
And although that might not be like the most sustainable and perhaps the best long term solution, I
Hmm.
do think it can be a viable, like, next step for someone who's very hooked on shopping fast fashion all the time to do something
Mm,
like rental
yeah.
or, shopping perhaps at a similar pace at secondhand. Again, I
Yeah.
don't think that's like
Yeah.
necessarily long term,
No, it's not.
developing a super healthy relationship with our clothes in our closet. But
Yeah.
if that replacement is like what is most accessible to that
Yeah.
person at that time,
Yeah.
and then maybe they continue on their journey,
Yeah. Yeah,
that I don't
maybe it's
know.
baby
It's something
steps
to
towards,
consider.
yeah, maybe it's, yeah, no, I totally agree. I think maybe it's just baby steps towards ultimate change, you know. Um it's still better than, yeah, continuing on their habit, you know, of shopping addiction, if, you know, to do it in a way that they're, you know, a secondhand. But yeah, I feel like we need like counselors in the fashion industry for fast fashion addicts, you know, you have people, counselors that help people, you know, with smoking addiction or food addiction. You know, we need that in fashion, you know, on a mass scale. Another
Yeah.
career choice consideration for those people aspiring to change careers. But yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's not a long term solution, and but I feel like with the sustainable ethical fashion movement, it's growing and evolving, and I'm kind
Mhm.
of proud of the movement in the sense that it being a global movement, we're constantly finding new ways, new concepts, new things are coming up, new solutions are coming up for these issues. Um, so it's just great. I'm just excited about the time when all of these voices will be amplified or will become mainstream, or rather all these solutions will become mainstream, if you know what I mean. Because it's just getting stronger and stronger every year, so hopefully we'll get to a place where either whether it be it through legislation or just through a change in this in culture, a shift in culture, where that way of shopping, that way of being, that way of existing, that lifestyle isn't really a thing anymore, you know. I don't know, maybe I'm dreaming too big, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I would love that future as well, for sure.
Mhm.
And I wanted to loop this back with something that you were talking about at the beginning with the waste, like the impact of fashion's waste crisis and waste
Mhm.
colonialism,
Yeah.
and how that connects to trends and this constant cycling through
Mhm.
of the latest, trendiest garments.
Mhm.
So, can you speak a little bit more about the impact of this massive amount of textile waste on many countries in the global south?
Yeah. There are several impacts. I think the three major ones, or four major ones rather, is obviously the environmental pollution, um, the economic impact, um, and health. So I'll just break it down really quickly. So the environmental impact, I think by now most people have seen documentaries or read articles about, particularly like in Ghana, for example, how clothes that are imported from the global north, they end up polluting the streets on massive levels, and the beaches, the oceans, right, the mountains of trash, and the amount that's being exported into the global south is so enormous. I feel like these countries, they can't really handle those levels of waste anymore. So basically we're just shipping our trash, right? And it's it's causing environmental pollution to a scale that's so unjust and so unfair to people in the global south, because in the first place, we're taking
Mhm.
the resources to make from the global south to make those products, right? And then we're using labor from the global south, and then we are dumping the waste back to them, you know. And then secondly, there's health, right? So earlier when I mentioned, for example, the water runoff from rivers and lakes, and a lot of that contains toxic chemicals from fast fashion, you know. So there's health implications in that. And also I also mentioned that they burn to reduce the trash, they burn it. And yeah, you have like fashion mixed in with like sometimes electronics and stuff like that. And burning these products releases some of the most toxic chemicals known to man, like dioxins and furans, And we know for a fact that,
Wow.
fast fashion has so many chemicals already, that are put in during manufacture that can cause, asthma, liver and kidney damage, as well as weakening the immune system. So we have things like, chromium and phthalates and uh, PFAS, and also lead, and, brominated flame retardants, which is it's a noble idea to have flame retardants in clothing, because I think that they're design I don't know if they were designed for this, but they're used for like children's pajamas, so if a house catches fire, they don't burn as quickly, which is fantastic. However, these some of these chemicals are banned in Europe, and because they change thyroid functions, and shift the way the body processes fats and carbohydrates, and there's also research linking bromates to ADHD as well as other things. So yeah, there's just a lot that we're beyond sending our trash. There's just so much more impact. And then, also, of course, the economic impact on these countries. So, a lot of these countries, they have a nascent fashion industry, and because we're shipping super cheap secondhand stuff, it doesn't allow their fashion industry to kind of grow and thrive, you know because I saw, so many tailor shops closing down, and these are local fashion designers where, their creativity, this would have been their creativity, their career, their passion, and all that just gets washed out, and even people who go to tailors to make their clothes, just that joy of like making something for yourself or having something made just for you, just for your body shape, there's a loss in that. There's a loss in that art. And economically, I don't think we can fathom how much, how the cost of, or rather the loss, financial loss, that countries in the global south are missing out on in terms of their
Mhm.
fashion industries because of exported secondhand trash, you
Yeah,
know so
absolutely.
yeah, we just possibly can't fathom that, and it just makes me really sad, for those reasons
Mhm.
I mentioned. Designers who, it's their dream to be a designer, but they just can't make it work because everyone is buying super cheap stuff that they don't even care about. It's incredibly sad.
Yeah, it's a bit of a loss of the art form, which
Hmm.
would be really sad to see. And that's what I'm excited about with the slow fashion movement, but
Hmm.
we are up against a lot for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
And I feel like you have a very unique perspective, having lived in Nigeria, the US, the UK, and now Australia. So I would be very curious about, with from your perspective, what sorts of connections do you see between all these systems and all the realities in the various countries around the world?
Between colonialism, or shall I say neocolonialism, and waste is basically a take make waste system loaded with the highest levels of inequality and exploitation of the global south imaginable, right? So to break it down, when it comes to taking, um, countries in the global north steal or take resources from the global south at incredibly unfair prices. There's a lot of inequality there through, trade deals or whatever. They're able to do this, and basically countries in the global south don't have a choice. And then there's the make part. So they make it mostly in the global south through cheap labor or even free labor. And we know this because, we know about garment workers being exploited. We know about modern slavery. We know that they're not paid livable wages, right? And then there's the waste part. So, of course, the goods are sold to countries, to people in the global north, who then use it or don't use it at all, and then sell it back to, after they're done with it, after it's used up, sell it back to countries in the global south, or even dump it back into their environments as waste, right? So, regarding the colonialism factor, I mean, because of, like I said, these imperialist trade deals, some countries in the global south, because they're unable to refuse um, having this waste, imported into their countries. And the reason why it's hard for them to refuse is because when they do refuse, sometimes they get blacklisted from trade deals with countries in the global north,
Hmm.
and they get excluded from other trade opportunities, and perhaps in other industries or other sectors. So it's a bit complicated for them to just say no. Although some countries have said no, like Kenya, Rwanda, technically, Nigeria said no, but corruption won in the sense that people still do it
Mm.
anyway, and the government doesn't enforce it. So yeah, it's really complicated. So, but this happens not just in fashion; it's basically the same system, like with electronics, automobiles, even pharmaceuticals. Um, between all of these countries and countries in the global south. So that's kind of the connection between these systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a bit more on like what you were talking about with the governments trying to ban the import of secondhand clothes, but coming up against issues,
Hmm.
I definitely recommend people listen to episode 31 with
Hmm.
Nikisi Sayumaga
Hmm.
of the Vintage or Violence podcast. She,
Yeah.
yeah, dove into the details of that. It's It's quite wild, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah.
And what are your, you know, or what impact do these systems, waste colonialism and fashion's very heavy environmental
Hmm.
footprint, have on women in the global south? And what are your perspectives on how we can change these realities and the circumstances that women and communities in the global south experience as a result of those issues?
We talk a lot about the issue of garment workers, the lives of garment workers,
Hmm.
for especially those of us in the movement, a lot of advocating for their rights. Very little is known or spoken about the life of secondhand garment workers in the global south.
Yeah.
So there's this documentary that was done by a, a network called the ABC here in Australia, where it was, I can send you the link actually. Basically it was filmed in Ghana, and they were showing the life cycle, what happens when they receive clothes imported, and the whole thing, the workers, how it gets divided, how it gets sold, and what happens to the things that they can't sell. I actually wrote a long, really really long article about it. So it also featured the life of secondhand garment workers. And what was interesting was their lives are almost identical with first-hand garment workers, where garment workers that manufacture clothing, right? You had a woman who had a toddler who had to go and fight for clothes, so she could sell secondhand, but then she was living in a small room with 5 or 6 other women and her child, you know. Um, so I thought that was really interesting how, women in the global south suffer so much so that we can wear cheap clothes that we don't really care about. Um, Also,
Hmm.
the nascent fashion industry, the development of that causes people to linger in poverty. So, there's loss of jobs as well. I'm not saying necessarily women are the only ones that could be tailors, but a significant portion of women were dressmakers, right? And that's what they're skilled at. That's what they're able to do. It puts them out of a job, and keeps them in poverty. Of course, they can find other things to do, but it's not like in countries in the global south, minimum wage jobs are just floating around for people. It's a very different society. So I think that's a massive impact on women. And one of the things that I experienced when I was in Nigeria, the time when I was a teenager, when I was about 15, we moved back to Nigeria, is that so I had this mindset. Now, don't judge me. I was really young. I had this mindset prior to that age that, women were more sort of feminine domestic and men were the breadwinners. Now, this came from three different places: one, religion that I was raised in; two, culture; and three, the movies that I watched. I mentioned I watched a lot of classical movies from the 40s and 50s, and that was what they had in those movies. So my mindset thought, yeah, that's what, women are just, grow up to be more domestic, and men are the breadwinners, right? So there's this one particular ethnic group in Nigeria that I was very blessed to observe, where the women did the physical labor and farming, and unfortunately the men just kind of drank all day in the local beer parlors. And that kind of just blew my mind. I'm like, what? Because the women not only did like were the ones working to support the family. I noticed that they were putting the ones putting the kids through school, and they were also like doing things with other women in the local community. And the men just kind of, and then also looking after their husbands, and I just kind of thought that felt so counterintuitive to me at the time. But then it also made me realize at 15 that whenever women have the power or are empowered, it trickles down to everybody in the family and also in the rest of the community. But that wasn't always the case whenever men had the power or the breadwinners. And it's not to put down men, it's nothing like that. It's just this is what I observed through this one particular ethnic group. And that just blew my mind. It was like a eureka moment. And I just thought to myself, certainly this is the key to solving poverty, is empowering women, making sure women have power, and access to finance, you know? And I think that was what inspired me to want to move to the UK and study international development, to help that. So when it comes to when it comes to the impact that it has, it's huge. The environmental impact is also huge. I talked about the pollution and health aspect of it. That affects women, because whenever there's disaster in a country, whether it's economic disaster, whether it's natural disaster, climate disaster, women always bear the biggest brunt of it, unfortunately, particularly in the global south. So yeah, all the impacts that we have about fashion, whether they're financial, economic, environmental, they just impact women in multiple ways.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I've definitely seen many statistics and reports that emphasize what you just said about the impact of giving women opportunities to finance and starting their own business, and just opportunities to lift themselves out of poverty, and how that
Hmm.
ripples through the community. So, yeah, absolutely. And this past hour or so has been just full of insights and takeaways and a lot of food for thought.
Hmm.
But before we wrap up this conversation,
Yeah,
I did have one last question for you.
sure.
And before I ask that, I just wanted you to share real quick where people can connect with you
Hmm.
and maybe work with you if they're looking for a styling service, or, how they can find you online.
Oh, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. Find me at eco.styles with an S at the end. You can come through my website. The website is basically ecostyles.com.au. AU is for Australia. Or just Google me, Nina Gabor. Um, yeah, that's pretty much how you can find me.
Cool. And all those links will be in the show notes as well. So you don't have to remember them if you're driving in the car or
Yeah.
something, or on a train.
Hmm.
And Nina, the final question that I have for you, that I ask everybody that comes onto the show,
Hmm.
is what would a better future for fashion look like to you?
Now, a better future for fashion. Um, I think it would be one where, by nature, everyone has conscious style. Plug, plug. Where, the whole thing, the whole concept of trends and, buying all the time doesn't exist. Everyone is able or given the space to figure out for themselves what they like as an individual, what they like to wear, how they like to feel when they get dressed, and is given the space to do that without judgment, without pressure from capitalistic ventures or other individuals, right? Um, and then a future also that looks like legislation. So there's legislation around how much, particularly fast fashion, ultra fast fashion, or even conventional fashion brands can manufacture, and countries have, limitations on how much uh, can be imported into their countries, how many garments per year can be imported into their countries,
Mhm.
and we have very strict guidelines around manufacturing so that it's circular by design. It can be reused, it can be taken apart easily and reused for other things at the end of life cycle. So it's as much as possible a circular system, and people just take responsibility for themselves with their wardrobes. Whether for how they acquire clothing, how they use it, and very importantly, how they dispose of it. So for example, clothes swaps become a regular thing, right? In addition to op shops and renting and all the other sort of secondhand ways of consuming fashion. So basically, at the end of the day, very, very, very little or nothing goes to landfill. That would be a dream.
Yeah. Beautiful dream. I love that.